Hello, everybody. This is Justin Case of American Newscape, rejoining our friend Scott Dudley for American Consciousness. Hello, Scott. My fingers seem to be fat this morning. I'm hitting the wrong button. So, with that being said, welcome back to American Newscape.
Yeah, you know what? My brain is fat, so
Yeah,
you think pushing things is hard. Trying to get thoughts to come out of your head in some sort of cohesive form. Oh,
yeah, yeah. Especially when they're non-existent. I understand that.
yeah, chasing the unicorn, as it were. Um,
Okay,
so
unicorns.
this was an interesting week for me. Partly because the dog park was closed, so we were doing like stealth dog parking in other parks, and that worked. But every time I went to somebody and said, I said, "Hey, what sounds good? What feels right now to talk about on podcast?" And one was like unhealed emotional trauma in families.
Wow.
One was like the things that your parents lost or didn't experience that you're trying to compensate for now that they're getting older. Or the other thing was the whole are we is killing CEOs horrific, or is the rate we're killing them at horrific?
Well, we're not allowed an opinion on that, Scott, but that's
Thus I did not go forward.
well. Those
But
are
and that's not a good topic for us because A, it's on everybody's lips,
Well, okay,
and
first,
B, it's
first,
like
fir- first, first, why did they close the dog park? What's that all about?
it was their desperate attempt to get winter grass to grow by planting it in early December, which it's better in November. So it's trying to grow, but if you know the soil of our valley, you know that that section of Imperial is not the best spot, and then it's a basin, so it's prone to flooding and it's prone to just not having a good basis for lawns. So
Well,
so they've prayed to the gods of ryegrass, and they've got some scattered stuff coming up, and it's open again.
well, good luck to them, and hopefully you
All right.
get your park back sooner than later.
It's back. So the last couple of days we've been back there, and the dogs have been all the dogs. Everybody's dogs when they come in are like, "Oh, thank goodness it's open again," because they're all used to it. It's their kind of walking around space.
Right, right,
But it's like, but all week long, I was like, one of the things that I do to kind of help get through the day is think, if this were a movie, what song would be playing right now? and and while I was having these like discussions with people on show development, it was like it's Nirvana, like, hey, wait, I've got a new complaint, was just like popping in my head, and I said, we can't do that. It's not who we are.
right.
You know, we will put sharp focus on things at times, but really what we're trying to do is kind of get us through without shooting stuff down, without taking stuff out that is too easy to take out. To be honest, I mean, it's like anybody can sit up and pontificate on critical stuff, on criticism, and it's easy to be a critic. So what happened was basically about halfway through the week, a couple days ago, I thought, you know what? It's the holidays. I don't want to do Christmas because that's kind of a weird thing to deconstruct. How about, I started thinking, Julie Andrews started whispering in my ear,
Wow.
and she said, "These are a few of my favorite things." And I was like, you know what? How about Justin and I? We just start rolling through our favorite things because everybody's got a list of favorite things.
Well,
And to get in touch with that list can be really restorative. It's like, oh, I've forgotten. This is something I loved when I was a kid, and I haven't circled back on it for 25 years. And so I thought, you know what, let's do that. Let's sit here, and not only that, but I've actually got a pad and paper, because if your favorite thing isn't one of my favorite things, I'm going to try it,
Okay. Okay.
because you probably got some pretty well grounded stuff.
Well, or peculiar stuff. And let's start the list with Julie Andrews. What a remarkable
You,
talent.
she did the first trans friendly movie, like
That's
in the history of the 70s. So I got mad respect for her.
well,
She played a guy, and she played it good.
and she did The Bitch, which was she did that movie because she was tired of being typecast, so she bared her breast for the world.
I remember that
And
too.
that was
I
classic.
don't know if I was old enough to be allowed to see it, but I do remember that.
So she was
No, she
a
was a
she,
amazing actress.
yeah, real lady, and she's still with us. So that's one of my favorite
So
things.
Julie, if you're catching the show right now, you got two fanboys just hanging out,
There you go.
wishing we had 4 octaves, because those 4 octaves were amazing.
Well, they were, and she certainly put them all to good use.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
So give me
well,
one,
let's
Scott.
let's all right. Let's start with our well. First of all, let's start with our dog park sponsored coffee, the Turkish coffee I'm drinking right now to kind of snap out of my nap time. What's your favorite coffee? Is coffee your favorite go-to warm-up beverage? And if so, how do you like it?
Well, it is. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite go-tos, but it's what I do in the morning because of the benefits. So I grind my whole beans. I add a mushroom supplement to it. I sweeten it with stevia, and away I go. And I only drink a quart of it in the morning, so I only have 1 cup of coffee.
Now, this isn't like that guy who comes in who drinks a case of beer and says, "Well, I only drink a six pack."
Yeah, there you
So
go.
you're not undercutting, are you?
No, no, no. It's just I make 1 pot a day, and it fits in the mug that I drink, and that's it. So there's a lot of health benefits I find in coffee. Some people may not find those same benefits, but my grandparents religiously drank a cup of coffee at the end of every meal, and always
Even
did.
dinner. So
Yeah.
it was time of day didn't really matter.
No, it didn't, and that's all they drank. They didn't go back for coffee, but they believed that a cup of coffee was the way you finished each meal. And I got into it later. I developed the habit while hunting, if you can imagine, cold in the woods, and it wasn't
Yeah,
too bad. So I got back to it and I stayed with it, and it's important. And caffeine is a good thing.
in moderation.
Well, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. So you're grinding your own beans. What do you have a go-to bean that you prefer, or do you kind of scout around and find your own?
Well, I don't have an unlimited budget when it comes to coffee, and I like the taste of certain coffees. Starbucks wouldn't be one of them, but I actually get a 2 pound bag of Hill's Brother dark beans, and that's what I grind. I get it from Walmart, so it's affordable. It's cheaper than most ground coffees. It's got good flavor, and Hill's Brothers is a real brand.
I don't know if you go back far enough, but you remember the grocery stores used to have those little grinders in the coffee aisle,
Oh yeah,
and you'd buy your 5 o'clock shadow or whatever it was called, and put it in the grinder, and it would grind it all out, and you'd get fresh ground coffee that way. But now we all have our little grinders, so we're all good to go.
oh yeah. Those little grinders for spices and big grinders for coffee.
Yep. My stepfather was a coffee aficionado, and what that means is he would buy green beans unroasted, and then he would roast his own.
Wow. Wow.
I always like going to his house because he was always eager to share whatever flavor or style. And he wouldn't do flavored coffees. He would just do regular coffee. So none of this vanilla cream,
Right.
that was all goofiness. But I'd be all coffeed up like 10 in the morning. He'd be like, "Do you want another cup?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I don't usually drink this much coffee."
Well, I would look at him like I'd look at those remarkable barbecue masters that smoke their meat for 36
Yeah,
hours at the specific temperature at specific attention. I'm just not that guy. It couldn't taste
yeah.
good enough for all that work.
I lost coffee, oddly enough, in the pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, I was the guy fighting for the cup of gray coffee at 3:30 in the afternoon that had been in the pot all day with whoever else was up for the battle, and dumping sweet and low in it, and some cream if I could find the right cream, and I was good to go. And one morning I woke up in the pandemic, and I was like, I'm awake and I'm feeling all right, and I just all of a sudden the desire or urge or need or whatever it was that was fueling like a 40-year coffee habit just disappeared. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I don't need coffee this morning. I think like at 9:30 at work, when I got to work at 9:30 in the morning, I had like a bottle of water, and I was like, oh, this is good.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing when we get those moments in our lives where we develop new perspective. Kind of like when I quit drinking. I just quit. Didn't see the need
Well,
to do it
fortunately,
anymore.
there were many people around that were able to pick up your slack.
Oh,
So
absolutely, absolutely. So, but they didn't quite understand. So, give me
no, it
another.
happened to me with cigarettes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, give me another one, Scott.
All right, let's do. How about your favorite fast food? Both you and I have grown up in the culture of fast food that really grew up around our generation. It was like my parents didn't get 29-cent hamburgers, but I did.
Well, yeah, I don't eat fast food anymore, but one fast food item that has always amazed me was a Jack in the Box item because when we moved to Phoenix in the late 60s, that was the first taco I ever had. And we all know that that's not really a taco.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Where
but
everybody, all of our local people are going.
but it's an amazing food. Can it be identified? Probably not. But it's a deep fat fried lettuce and pate and American cheese in a corn tortilla with some nasty taco sauce, but it's a remarkable food.
I they are yummy, and they're even yummier when they're made by experts in the old style of whatever. My favorite fast food. So I'm kind of, I don't know why you don't eat fast food anymore. Maybe it's could be religion, could be health, could be a lot of different reasons. But
Well,
but mine, whenever I get off of because I'm real disciplined low carb keto, so that's the only way I can stay moderately healthy. But whenever I take it like a week or two break, maybe once or twice a year at the most, not very often. It is me running down for animal style double double, animal style fries, and trying to get away with as much of that as I can.
and you're satisfied, or you're just. I can't imagine it's a culinary experience for you, but it just brings back some fond memories, I assume.
It is a delicious hamburger, and I like delicious hamburgers. I ain't gonna lie. As a matter of fact, keto buns and keto bread have been kind of a godsend to me because the want to talk favorite foods. I remember I for like about 8 months I lived with this guy and I didn't have a car. And around the block was a little liquor store, but they had this little grocery aisle, so I could like walk and get groceries. I ate farm my baby Swiss cheese grilled cheese sandwiches on good nut bread for 8 months in a row.
Yeah, but that
I
sounds like a
loved them.
yeah, it sounds like a good sandwich actually.
Oh man, I love grilled cheese. I'm still a grilled cheese monster.
Okay, let me give you a couple go-tos that I have. I've got it would be not only music but songs. There's certain songs I can pull up to adjust my mood in a snap of a finger. And all I have to do is think about them. And if I think about them too long, I'll start singing them to myself. And they're extremely therapeutic to me. So I don't know how I could have survived this long without those songs.
What are your go-tos?
Oh, Frankie Lane's Lucky Old Son. This morning it was, oh, what's the title of it? It would have been another types of those songs. Another song I use because I find it a satire, which is Meatloaf's "Life Is a Lemon." Now I don't believe the words of that song, but I find them extremely entertaining.
Was he trolling us? Was he the whole point of the song was to get people to believe in something that he deep down thought was just a kind of a joke?
Well, I don't, Meatloaf was one of my favorite artists of all time. He did an album and then he disappeared. And 25 years later, he came back and did another album, both hugely successful. And one of the main songs on his second album was Life is a Lemon, and I Want My Money Back. And it was comical. And, people that don't appreciate Meatloaf, he was not a singer, he was an actor.
No, absolutely, absolutely.
And always found that enjoyable. And his songs always spoke to me.
Nice. I think for me, the go-tos have always been uh, bands and songs that really fused a lot of different kinds of music. Prince fused R&B and rock and torch songs and all sorts of different. So it's all and jazz, and it's all happening at once. And in any given song, there's elements of all of these disparate types of genres that he's mastered. That he's mastered. Another one for me is the band Little Feat, run by a guy named Lowell George, who was amazing, amazingly troubled, but he was amazing. And you're listening to their songs, and it's like, is this country? Kinda. Is it bluegrass? Kind of. Is it Dixie? Kind of. Is it rock and roll? Kind of. Is it rhythm and blues? Kind of. And I really have respect, and it attracts me in terms of listening to bands that are able to pull off that this isn't just a genre song. We're not just kind of resting ourselves in a certain type of music, and that's what we're doing. That's okay. I don't have complaints about that. I listen to a lot of that kind of music. But the bands who really launched for me were the bands that were able to combine and meld and fuse in a single song all of these different kinds of music. So I would say those Little Feat was the best concert I have ever gone to. Jay Giles band was probably the second best. A couple of excellent performers, and Jay Giles band was, as you were saying, more of an actor than a musician, perhaps. Um, they certainly acted out their music a lot, but Little Feat was almost the opposite. Lowell George was 300 pounds. He had a very serious drug problem, so he was rarely up on stage. He had really bad. He was a depressed introvert with mad musical skill. He got kicked out of Zappa's band for using drugs.
My goodness. Didn't even know that was
And he was
possible.
one of those Laurel Canyon guys. So he was, he was hanging out singing ballads with Linda Ronstadt back in the day in Laurel Canyon when they were all back there.
Yeah, it was in the water, in the air. They couldn't help but have drug issues.
Well, yeah, but he got taken out by his. At the end of the day, he didn't make it past. He did the kind of the Jim Morrison thing.
Right. Well, the most amazing concert I ever went to, and people find this hard to believe, but it was George Benson. And
Ooh, I saw
George,
George Benson.
yeah, George Benson when he played the guitar, it wasn't a guitar. I mean, he was that guitar was possessed by him. He could make sounds come out of a guitar I've never heard from any other individual. And the concert I went to had 13 encores.
Oh, he was in a good mood.
And the crowd was too. And I mean,
Yeah. Well,
it was like during the week. It's like 1:30 in the morning. Can we leave? Come on, George, give it up, give it up. But just an amazing musician. But he's known for his pop songs, and that's just sad.
well, and he's one of those guys that fuses a lot of elements into his music.
Hmm.
So you'll hear, straight up jazz. You'll hear R&B. You'll hear good pop music, which is to me isn't that won't kick you off my island.
Well,
Some of my favorite bands are pop bands.
and a voice that can be an instrument. When I say that, those are the people that Bing Crosby, the boo boo boos, and the things like that, can actually use his voice as an instrument, and very just found a lot of joy in his music. And every once in a while, I'll happen back upon some and relive those days.
Nice. Yeah, I remember that concert and that moment in time when he was acknowledged for the talent that he had and was really on the top of the world.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So, okay, give me another one, Scott.
All right, let's do this. So place to go. Where are am I in heaven or am I in Miami? You know.
Well, I was always a home sort, so every time I traveled internationally, I could not wait to get back home. Um, I've been to some remarkable places, and one of them I'd like to revisit is the Chiricahua National Forest in southern Arizona, and that would have been home of the Chiricahua Apaches, but just saw some amazing things there, like snow crystallizing on the trees, and country that just hadn't been very many human beings had ever seen. And Chiricahua is the national, Cochise stronghold. If you believe in
Yes, yes.
spiritual places, go stand on the base of that mountain for a while and see what you think. And spiritual Sedona. I mean, there's a lot of interesting mojo comes out of that red rocked area.
Not the art hippie culture. Is that what
No,
you're referring to?
no, 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 no. It'd be more of a spiritual culture, and
Ah,
it,
like a
it
deep dive.
yeah, like where Casper would hang out. It's just an interesting part of the country. So, but I find I find every time I go somewhere in the United States, I'm just awed by not necessarily the scenery as much as the people, the diversity of the people.
I will agree with that. And one of the, I didn't expect when I gave up flying. I basically just at one day got like grouchy old man, get off my yard. It's like, you know what? I am done flying. I'm done with having to go through the X-ray machine. I'm done with waiting in line. I'm done with the hassles and the costs and everything associated with flying. I'm done with it. So, I'm not going to get one of those special licenses that lets me fly. No, forget it. I'm done.
Yeah.
And I started renting cars and driving around the as far as I could drive without running into the ocean, I guess. And I will vouch for your words. It's like, first of all, it is an amazingly beautiful country. We've got stuff that people don't really appreciate because it's not really part of our social media feed. There are some amazing places. There's some amazing places in the valley,
Yeah.
just locally for us that are just fantastic. But you start driving, up Route 66, and one thing after another. But I will agree with you. At the end of the day, the best parts about it, we're stopping in the gas stations, we're stopping in the little eateries, we're stopping on the corner markets, and talking to people who really were friendly,
Yeah.
who cared about you, who were good to hang out with. And it would be just a really random group of people because, you get a bunch of truckers in the room and they're coming from all over the place. But they all have the same kind of down to earth vibe.
Well, I've been to New Orleans many times, and I don't recommend it to anybody. But I remember one of the times we were being driven back to the airport by an African American cab driver about my size, and he said, "Well," he goes, "What would have made your trip better?" I said, "Finding some good beans and rice." I said, "Who makes the best beans and rice?" I said, "I went to these acclaimed restaurants." I said, "It just wasn't there." And he said, "Oh, my grandmother." So
Right.
he makes that statement, and I said, "How does she make them?" He entertained us for 15 minutes. The intricacies of how Grandma made those beans and rice, and his passion for that story was like one of those moments you were going, it just doesn't get any better than this. This guy being able to honor his grandmother and honor food, which was very important to him. And he just opened up. And I believe if you're willing to talk to people on your excursions and be vulnerable to
and,
them,
and, and get their story and get their
yeah,
story.
absolutely, be a little vulnerable. Let them tell you. Don't be the ugly American.
I always find that interesting because it's almost the tendency that we've been coached up on to be ready with our story.
Yeah.
To not hear their story because you're already loading yours, and then you're like halfway through your story and you're like you realize, wait, they're loading their story, they're not listening to mine either.
Well, that's a problem you and I don't have. So I do think we find a passion and interest in people.
Oh man, I try and listen, I try to really hear because I get so much growth from that. It's like I've only got one perspective if I'm like this, but if I can somehow hear and get to other people's perspectives, then my perspective matures in some really nice ways.
Right. And that moment in time that you have with that individual may never happen again. So that's your one shot.
Well, let's see. For me, every time I drive through New Mexico, and I'm listening to these really funky offbeat FM stations, just amazingly diverse. Like who's picking these songs? These are so good. Um, and the countryside, and it's all silver because of the sagebrush, and I really, something about New Mexico just kind of really gets me going. But when I was younger, when I had little ones running around, I would do the lap of California. So I would go up the Sierras with a rental car, up the Sierras, and then all the way up to like Lassen, which is at the top of that, and then I cut over and go to Happy Camp, which is where Bigfoot is, and then I go right down the coast, and go all the way down the coast, all the way back. And we would camp for a day and see the place and hike and do all sorts of stuff, maybe 2 days. And then we'd pack it all up and zip down to the next spot. And the next spot was, 3, 4 hours away, but we drive there and enjoy that. And so over the years, we were able to see almost every campground and all of the natural beauty of California. I was always amazed that we've got this state where everybody kind of sees LA whenever they visually think about California. And I would spend like 6 hours driving outside of cell phone range.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
were no cell towers. You, you pull over because you have to use the restroom, and you walk out and you can hear elk bugling in the hills. And it's like, where else, man? It's just a fantastic place.
Well, that's the aspect of seeing the world, getting out and doing that. And flying really never offers people that perspective.
No, it doesn't. I mean, it's fun. I sit at the window seat and I take pictures of the clouds and the mountains and the desert and the lakes or whatever else, but it's not the same. It's like watching TV.
Well, that's where we would both concur. If you have a chance to do some traveling, rent a car, get out with your kids, and just start driving. I don't even know if you need a destination. Just get
No, I
going.
really everywhere I've accidentally gone, like I've gone cross country now like 5 or 6 times. Each time I kind of divert a little bit. Well, okay, I always spend the night in Tucumcari because of the Clint Eastwood movie where the guy said this train's stopping in Tucumcari. So I'm like,
Tucumcari,
so am
Tucum,
I. I am
Tucumcari,
stopping in
right?
Tucumcari.
Oh
So
gosh. Okay.
for whatever reason, that's the spot that never loses the map. But I otherwise I'll go crosswise, I'll go north south, I'll go off on little side highways, and I am never disappointed. There's always very cool stuff going on.
Well, yeah, and I'm kind of a history junkie, so if I get any chance to experience at least that region of the country, or to try and take myself back there with my imagination, I always jump at that chance.
Yeah, absolutely. Just amazing stuff. I mean, you get to Montana and you're like, oh, I see why you call this big sky country. It's like beyond a Midwesterner's dreams how broad and expansive that uh, sky can be there. It's so much beauty in the world.
Well, and another favorite place I have would be both of the Apache Indian reservations in Arizona. For whatever reason, the Apache Indians have accepted me, I guess, for my idiosyncrasies, and I consider them friends and remarkable people with a remarkable history and a remarkable perspective.
So when you were younger and Paul Revere and the Raiders song Arizona came on, were you grooving to it?
No, 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 no. A good friend of mine, oh gosh, I shouldn't say that. I won't remember his name. But the Arizona Balladeer was a friend of mine, and he's still alive. He's had to give up singing, but his perspective of Arizona, there's he's been places I haven't been in the state, and there would have been a time that I would have claimed to have been everywhere. But he brings those places to life.
Nice. Nice. I actually did kind of like that song. That was Paul Revere and the Raiders.
There you go.
A decent pop band. There you go.
Well, yeah,
How,
you
how easy to win my heart.
you throw around the word decent around pretty freely there. But they had the best name. They had a cool name.
They really well. Raspberries. Raspberries was another decent pop band that had a clever name, and they were Midwestern. So I always had a little bit of Midwestern favoritism.
Okay, okay.
So
So what?
how about sports? Do you like sports? Is sports entertaining to you? Is it something that's worth your time?
I played sports on a pretty high level in various sports, and basically wore out of watching them. I was more of a participant than a fan.
More fun to do than to just spectate.
Right, and I gave up on sports when I needed to give up on sports, so there's no regrets. I don't live in the past. There was no glory in the levels of play that I played at. For me, it was just what I did. So yeah, I think different sports for different things that I appreciated. Weightlifting was one. Certainly did that at a high level. Competitive shooting was another because that was a cerebral game. Baseball was a cerebral game. And then I had a chance to scout baseball. So if you don't have enough talent, why don't you go find talent?
Because all you need is the eye.
Well, and perspective and communication skills. When I was scouting, the primary concern of the team I scouted for was, will the player's parents allow him to sign a professional contract? And I thought to myself,
Yeah.
wow, I never Why would that be? Well, the best players I ever scouted, their parents wouldn't let them sign a professional contract, so it made sense. Uh, but sports are, they're heavily layered, very interesting. You know, was on the attraction committee when the Arizona Cardinals were leaving St. Louis, coming to Arizona. Had my role there. So I've been lucky to see sports from various angles, various levels. Some are professional, and it's part of my past, but it's interesting. I can watch a NFL football game if I care about the team, which would be the Arizona Cardinals, as for that mention. But if other teams are playing, I don't care. Am I going to watch the Super
Eight and
Bowl?
seven, and in the playoff hunt as we speak.
7-7.
Oh, well, I'm previewing the weekend. They're going to win this week. So,
Yeah, they are going to win this week. But if they're not in the Super Bowl, I'm not going to watch. I don't care. The hype is not what it's about.
oh man, the Super Bowl taught me such a valuable lesson because I used to like just glue myself, right? Because oh my God, it's a Super Bowl. It's. I used to believe, like probably a lot of sports spectators, that me watching the game influenced the outcome. My rooting, my deep spiritual intent for that pass to be completed was somehow making it happen. And if I pulled back from that, it was all it would all disintegrate. And then one year, my wife said, "Hey, you know what? It's a beautiful day. Let's just go fishing." I'm like, "Sweetheart, the Super Bowl's on." She said, "Yeah, that's fine, and let's go fishing." and and I went fishing, and there was the lesson. There was the insight. I got home, and I was like, "Wait, me not watching this game didn't influence the outcome." And now that we've got DVRs, I'm even more so like, I'm not going to watch the game live. I'm going to watch the game recorded so that I can skip the commercials all the time. And I can actually watch a basketball game in 40 minutes instead of 2.5 hours.
Right. Well, and you take the hype out of it, and you're not a sucker for hype.
No, I'll stay off of social media because I don't want to know the final score. But I am not. No, my attraction to sports was initially playing, and eventually sports sorted me out. So sports eventually
Yes.
told me you're not going to be a football player, and then it said you're not going to be a baseball player. I was good enough to play basketball up through city league, and city league in our city was tough. So I was an okay basketball player, but my attraction almost always after the initial like, hey, joy of competing was coaching. So I would always watch like what plays are we running? Why are we running them? Are we working to this team's strengths? Are we able to disrupt the other team's strengths? And so that was always my curiosity point, and that hasn't really gone away. So even now, if I'm like just randomly watching something, I'm not watching with a rooting interest per se. I'm watching with a clinical interest. I'm watching with oh, okay, they're playing too deep cover because they're scared of this receiver because they haven't got anybody on their team who can run this fast. And so I'm kind of watching for tendencies, and I'm just doing the whole coaching in my head thing. But that was always kind of my initial attraction to sports. And when I go to watch sports, if it's not like my alma mater, I'll watch Michigan State just because Michigan State's Michigan State. Um, but if I'm watching other sports, I'm definitely watching for the strategy.
Well, we grew up when the Olympics were. I think we were taught that it was a pure sporting event. Before money was involved in the Olympics,
Right,
and
100% amateur.
yeah,
If we can go back far enough before the Munich terrorism attacks, it was apolitical. So there wasn't this whole kind of element of we're kicking these guys off or these guys off or these guys off. The Russian steroid stuff hadn't quite bloomed yet, so it was a purer time.
well, and there wasn't so much money involved in it, which led to the Salt Lake City corruption, and it's just not. I can't enjoy it anymore. There's just too
Oh,
much.
what cities would do to get the bid was fairly vulgar.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it tainted the sport. But there's still people that love it.
Yeah, I never was that good, and I like watching people compete for the joy of the sport, but not enough to like it's gonna like I'm having a bad day. I'm gonna go watch sports to feel better. Not at that level.
Well, I learned something about civil rights in the Olympics watching the New Mexico or the Mexican games. Back in what year
All
was
right,
that? 68, I
I
think,
remember.
maybe.
Yes,
I'm,
68.
I remember that. I didn't understand why everybody was so upset, but I remember that. And it made sense.
I remember that because in 1968 I was 6 years old and living, and I was the only Anglo child living in an all-black neighborhood. So I was definitely schooled on the value of that and the statement that it made in terms of trying to reclaim some power for your people in a place where that power wasn't really appreciated or supported.
Well, if
So
you,
yeah, I saw that. That was
yeah,
interesting.
it was interesting. So what else, Scott? Give me a fond memory that would surprise us that is a go-to for you.
Fond memory. Oh, well, I'm getting older now, so I don't remember anything, which is nice.
Yeah, I agree.
All the goods and the bad. Sure. Um, I was, meeting two people. I'll say because of three people. I'll go three people deep because each one of these three people I met and as a kid, and I was just like taken aback by their aura, by the vibe that surrounded them. Even because when I was a little kid, I was even more probably I've turned it down a little bit, I think, because it's just too much noise. But when I was a little kid, I would just absorb whatever energy people were giving, and so I was like you know those people who say, "Well, dogs always know." So if like your dog's barking at somebody, it's like, "Well, that must be a bad person because dogs." I was kind of that kid. So three people. Uh, Joan Baez.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, I wish you had a thing for guys 20 years younger than you because I would follow you to the ends of the earth, child, because she just had this clarity. Like she was almost like crystalline. And it was so peaceful and grounded and she could just like enforce it on the group of people around her. So you had all these rabid radio or music executives who are just scuffling for that buck and trying to cut every deal that they can and they'd walk in the room with her and all of a sudden it'd be like we're in church, and they're like boom. And so I met her and that was amazing. BJ Thomas, remember Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head?
I do. So,
He had this energy to I somewhere I've still probably got a signed dollar bill. He signed a dollar bill for me. But I again I because my dad was in the business, I didn't just like get the dollar bill and walk away. I got to spend, like an hour or two hanging out in the room while he dealt with everybody. And I would just sit there and it was like, wow, you are such a magically grounded person. And for me as a kid it was like, oh, this is possible. Human beings can be this grounded. Because if you haven't really seen like a demonstration, you don't know if that's even possible. And so it was for me, it was really useful because I can go back and say, you know, that's something I can aspire to. And even back then, I was like, oh, if you can be this grounded, I can do this. I'm going to start trying to figure out that pathway in my own life. So that was really good. The third one's going to surprise you. Detroit, Pontchartrain Hotel. Uh, the rooftop suite executive, whatever that huge party area is. It's full of people. They're all drinking. It's the 70s. It's like half of them are probably high. I don't know. Yeah, because I was a little kid, and I get walked up and introduced to David Cassidy.
okay.
and and David Cassidy was like he might as well have been the Buddha. He was so zen. And here's a guy who's being paraded out and completely, just marketed. He had lunch boxes, he had this, he had that, and this event was a room full of hundreds of people who are getting their moment of David Cassidy, and he's was just so calm and so smooth, and so, maybe he'd been taking Valium, who knows, but he was so authentically calm, and I just felt it right away, and I was like, I'm gonna go sit like in a where so I'm not gonna interrupt his flow of having to deal with people, but I'm gonna sit close enough that I can just absorb this energy for a little while and be present to it. And who knew, right? Who knew David Cassidy had that energy in him,
Well, somebody has to. And you recognized it.
right? I've got the radar for that. So those are, and so if I look back on fond memories, all of those, the thing that all of those have in common were they 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 pushed me to develop as a human being.
Well,
And so it's interesting that that would be the fond memories.
well, it's different for me, Scott. I've met a lot of, I'll say, so-called celebrities or important people. Um, but if I use three, it would not be for necessarily fond memories, but certainly development. Because I knew Barry Goldwater on a first name basis. I did not like him. I'm not sure he liked me. I knew a very famous Arizona State football coach who coached me in summer camps and coached in the NFL, who was Frank Cush, and he had a
I
lasting
remember.
and he and Barry both had a lasting impact. And what that impact was is I'm not going to be like these guys. You know, life's too short.
I can think of people who make that list for me too.
And then a third one I'll put on that same list, and I met them all about the same time, would have been Mo Udall, who was a congressman from Tucson, politically diverse from me, ran for president of the United States. But what a remarkable, gracious, he loved
He
people.
was a sweetheart, wasn't he? He always
Well, he
gave off
was.
like I'm just a kind, gentle person who cares.
Right. And what I used to like about him was he always started his introductory story with how when he played basketball in the ABA, and he would go into that. And he was just a lot of fun to be around. And he was somebody you could have your kids aspire to be like because he was a good human being.
Nice. Now you've triggered me a little bit because I'm thinking, if fond memory, church, oddly enough, I can remember our church group would get together and we'd go to camp for a week in on the coast of Lake Michigan, or at another place that was next to a lake, and it was beautiful. And so the church community would gather there, and in the evenings they would just sing songs and dance. And there was one song by a woman from Africa, and I wish I could drop her name, but I can't. But it went dun 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 dun. So it was a really cool song, and everybody had already figured out their dances, and this was like in the '60s, so it wasn't like a line dance. It was everybody making poetry to the music, and I could just remember as a little kid, and dancing was never my strong suit. Um, I can always remember as a little kid just watching it and being in awe of the way that people could turn sound into movement, and I'll take that as a fond memory.
Okay. 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 What about foods for you, Scott?
What about foods? I don't know. I'm an omnivore, and I grew up poor enough that honestly, if you make Kraft macaroni and cheese, the old stuff with the real orange toxic chemical in it,
Absolutely. The preservatives.
use real butter and use half and half. I'm in a there's a form of heaven there for me. Um, I can remember I can remember the first time my grandma, I hated mushrooms, right? Because I was a kid. Kids hate mushrooms. I think there's a rule. And I was about 11 or 12 years old, and she's like, try this. And she gave me a sausage stuffed mushroom. There was no turning back. I had left the farm. I was there was and I ate I continue to eat everything mushroom involved, like it's heaven, and it is. And the stuffed mushrooms are still like something to die for. My other grandma, we had all these rules when I was growing up in my house: no sugar sweetened cereal, no soda pop, no none of that stuff. My parents were lost generation, so they were a little bit older than the baby boomers, but they had all these righteous rules about you're supposed to be healthy. My mom tried to sneak into my food for like 20 years. And every time she'd do, I'd be like, what is this stuff? I can't stand it. So we had all these rules, but I would go up to my grandparents who lived on Saginaw Bay in Michigan, beautiful place, just gorgeous, right on the beach. And I would walk into the house and grandma would say, I just finished baking cookies for you. And the fridge is full of orange crush. And so I would get these snickerdoodles, and these really good chocolate oatmeal cookies, and all sorts of things. And of course I would just hammer those. I was probably why I can't eat sugar to this day.
Well, yeah, but what a fond memory.
Oh, well, not only that, but so going back in my head, I remember the taste of the food. I remember how gratifying that was. But the love that both of my grandparents, I was fortunate enough to get from my grandmothers, this I'm cooking for you
Oh,
love.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and they were both marvelous cooks, so that was a good thing.
Well, and that's what grandma's, nobody cooks like a grandmother.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Although I'll say this, it was funny once my three kids were here together, which took a little moment in time because two of them are quite a bit older, and my youngest was I just served dinner, and my youngest was kind of like poking at it with some doubt, and my oldest turned to her, like I was out of range, so I wasn't supposed to be like hearing this. He didn't say it for my benefit, but he turned to her and he said, "Hey, Dad is an amazingly sneaky good cook." He says, "There's no way this isn't going to taste delicious. I'm just going to tell you right now, if he serves something, just go for it." And I
And
was like, "Yes." I was doing like a little happy dance out in the kitchen. I was like, "Yes."
did she go
I,
for it?
that Yeah, she did. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Ate the food, and after that and my youngest and I were food buddies because we could eat double cheeseburgers until the cows came home.
Yeah,
So
not a real skill, Scott.
we go to restaurants in remote areas because you know my camping buddy for a dozen years, it could be roadkill, but we would eat it and enjoy it and have fun with it.
Well, and the food is different throughout the country. I remember I had to put in a week of work in Du Bois, Wyoming, and I was out of town from the big city. And once the locals heard that I was there, the restaurant owner came and invited me to his restaurant. He wanted me to try some food.
Nice.
And the first night it was Mexican. They were going to try and serve Mexican food, and it was typical northern USA hamburger, American cheese, uh, wrapped up in a tortilla. And he wanted to know what I thought of it. I said, "Hey, that's really good food. It's just not Mexican."
Right. Put
And
put put pickles and mustard and ketchup. You got a cheeseburger and a tortilla.
The next night he wanted me to come again. I was thinking about traveling to another town to eat, but I agreed to go because he was a very nice gentleman and he served me pizza. And he said, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, I'm guessing you don't have any garlic or basil or
Or your 23andMe is not going to come out very Italian.
I said, you need to read up and get some spices." But it was good food. It was good food. But it wasn't pizza and it wasn't Mexican food. But it was still entertaining. It was still enjoyable. It was still a fond memory. His passion for wanting to please his customers was, it's rewarding to be in that presence.
And those are foods that I'll just scarf down because I grew up in the Midwest. So
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You talk about I cook Italian food, and I've traveled the world and eaten some of the fanciest Italian restaurants with the Italian chefs in the world. And lo and behold, I was in Camarillo, California, found this little offbeat Italian restaurant, went in, and the food was decadent. I got to talking to the owners, and everything was precise and perfect. And the owners was family, two sons, growing up in the family business, probably about 10 tables at best. And they were both Hispanic. They looked Italian, but they were Hispanic. And I lobbied them, it was right before we came here, to come down here and open a restaurant. I mean, that's how good that food was. Name of that restaurant, it was Veronica's in Camarillo. And my God, unbelievable. Just
nice.
unbelievable.
There's a fast food place in Downey, California that I keep. It's on my list. So eventually, someday, if I'm lucky enough to drive through there, I'll stop and eat. It's Middle Eastern Mexican, and they've got the most incredible combo dishes that completely would blow away either culture's ideas of what food are. But together they look so good. So you've got this Middle Eastern dish with all this stuff, and it's got like hot Cheetos on it, and and you just look at this thing, and your mouth just starts watering uncontrollably. So it's on my list to go. And if you Google those terms, Downey, California, hot Cheetos, Middle Eastern Mexican, it'll pop. It'll pop because it's well known. I was lucky enough to grow up in LA, so I got stuff like Fat Burger and Pink's hot dogs, and I got all sorts of interesting kinds of food.
Well, see, that's where we've been blessed. We've been around, and it's what you're talking about. It's finding your joy, and there's joy in these memories. And here's the last one I'll give you, Scott. It's actually learning. I enjoy educating myself. I enjoy the opportunity to learn something and put it to use. So there's a lot of joy.
Yeah, is that scheduled for our next segment, or you're holding back?
No. Well, you and I could do a segment on self-education or,
We
personal
certainly could.
growth.
I'm
Personal.
guilty as charged.
We might lose the audience, but hey, they might learn something.
My oldest kid just sent me 5 interesting books for Christmas. That's what I get. Like, and they're all like thick, hard reads. And I was excited. I opened it up. I don't even know where to start. So I'm going to start with Sing Like a Fish. It's a research novel that talks about how everything that lives underwater uses auditory guidelines to help guide their behavior, and that's fascinating. I'm going to learn all sorts of stuff that I don't know.
Well, you are. I don't want to ruin the ending, but you do realize we all use auditory guidelines, right?
But underwater, it's like I knew if I clap my hands underwater, you can hear something. But the idea that all of these underwater creatures who live there have this whole sound system thing set up.
Right.
And I knew whales. I knew whales because of their echolocation stuff. We had to like not make so much noise in the ocean because it wasn't good for their echolocation. So I knew some things, but I can't wait to hear what that book's got to tell me. I got one for you. Movies. Are you a movie guy?
Yes.
Where do you go from where's your what's your sweet spot for movies?
Well, they're really kind of some eclectic tastes. I am heterosexual, but I do enjoy musicals because I grew up as a little kid watching them. My Fair Lady, the greatest movie of all time, Paint Your Wagon. You got Clint Eastwood singing, Lee Marvin singing in Paint Your Wagon. I mean, it's just enjoyable getting lost in a movie. I don't like dramatic movies or action ad- action movies because I'm there to relax. A few laughs. Don't want to be scared. Don't like horror
It's
movies.
it's interesting. One of the people at the dog park doesn't go to movies very often and wouldn't watch them at home on TV because they are astute enough to understand how it's going to end. And so they feel like it's like listening to a 2 hour joke in a comedy bar where you already know the punchline. And it's funny for me because I struggle with that because it's like, yeah, if I sat down every time I watched a movie, if I sat down and like thought about it, I know where the plot's going. This isn't rocket science. Um, but I like being lost in the sensation. I like being lost in one of the characters or in more than one of the characters, kind of like, oh yeah, that's kind of how I would have dealt with that, or whoa, that's different. Maybe that's an interesting way of doing it.
Well, you and I are unique because we live where we live, and going to movies here when we first got here, the audience is 90% Hispanic, which is fine. And of that 90%, probably 50% was not really fluent in English. So in watching movies with them, they would collectively laugh at things that I didn't understand why it was funny. So it became more entertaining to watch them react to the movie than actually watching the movie.
My most magical movie language thing was as my Spanish was developing, I started watching a lot of Cantinflas movies
Okay.
in Spanish. And Cantinflas is so random in how he combines words and concepts that it's not even Spanish. It's some other weird way of communicating. But it really helped me to hear subtleties in Spanish that as an English speaker I would have no clue. And eventually I could screw up words as elegantly as Cantinflas. So I even came up with a verb for it, cantinfliando, which is to speak like Cantinflas.
Well, English is my first language, and I'm certainly challenged with it. So other languages are often lost on me. Uh, so,
Both my parents were movie people, by the way, not in the movie business, but they were like cinephiles. They were so so. I'm like 6 years old, sitting through 3 hours of Lawrence of Arabia. Um, we would go to like my dad would take me to an all-day Marx Brothers festival in the theater,
oh my
and
gosh.
and I loved it. And Groucho is almost like Cantinflas in English. It's like he had such a good knack for shading the language in ways that made it go places that no one else could make it go. And so as a kid watching that stuff, I just ate it up. I go to Chaplin film festivals, so I saw all of the Charlie Chaplin silent films as a kid. Um, Jaws. I went to the Jaws was like the scariest movie I ever saw. I went to the premiere, waited in line, and walked in there and was horrified. I still can't swim in water over my head without having like a little dun 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 playing in my head.
Well, I was lucky. I
So
was I was still a kid, but seeing Jaws at the drive-in it
right.
really wasn't that scary. But yeah, it's takeaways from life. You talk about premieres. I got to go to the premiere of the Ghostbusters, the original Ghostbusters, and that
Yeah,
that thing was just so off the wall for its time.
that was an amazing movie. Very, very creative. Harold Ramis was as a writer and a person who kind of oversaw how movies made was amazing. That was a significant loss to us when he kind of passed a little bit early.
Well, and a lot of those guys did, but yeah. So just fond memories. You know,
My mom promised me to go to the opening night of Young Frankenstein, and then she came home and she'd been in a fender bender, and it freaked her out. So she was like, I'm never going to drive again. And I walk out and I look at the car, and the car drives okay, right, Mom? She's like, yeah. I said, well, the movie starts in an hour. We can still make it. And so and she always thanked me. She was like, she said, if that had gotten stuck, like I don't want to drive anymore because driving's dangerous. It would have limited me forever. And instead, I badgered her into taking us to see this movie. And Gene Wilder and that was a crazy good movie. You know
well,
what? I'll give you one that probably wouldn't pop on you wouldn't bet for me. Jesus Christ Superstar.
oh yeah.
Amazing movie. I mean, moving as heck. So amazing that I actually went and saw theater productions of it 3 or 4 times.
Well, when the music came out, that was a remarkable album. And didn't the music come out before the movie? Yeah,
Right, pretty concurrent.
pretty concurrent. Okay.
And Godspell was another interesting movie. Godspell didn't grab me like Jesus Christ Superstar. That was as a matter of fact, if I was going to do some weird holiday thing, I would dial up that movie and just kind of watch that, and that would be my reason for the season or whatever.
Well, and see, we're not, you and I aren't grabbing depressing movies like Brian's Song and all those others.
Oh, okay. I shouldn't even share this because this is horrific. So right after my separation, pending towards my first divorce, and so I'm fairly needy at this point, right? Like way too needy. I find this amazing woman. I just everything I ever wanted in a woman was in this woman. It was a complete package. I say, hey, let's go out to a movie. Like, yeah, let's go out to a movie. We went out and saw Schindler's List,
Oh, God.
and and I just fell into the horror of this movie. And so I'm watching this like for 3 hours. I get tears streaming down my face. I love the movie. I did not get a second date.
Probably not. Probably not. And not
No,
a,
not even close. Not even close.
and not a good choice, Scott. What were you thinking?
It was a really good movie coming out. I love to go see. I'm gonna. There are a couple of Christmas films that I'm interested in going to see, just because I'm interested, and I may have to sweet talk my movie date into going out and seeing these with me. But I go see some movies that she wants to see that I'm not that high about going to, and so I think it's fair.
Well, I used to, one of my early relationships, which was reasonably long term, we would take turns picking the movie.
That's fair, right?
And it was fair. And she got so upset with me because she enjoyed the movies I picked much more than the movies she
Nice.
picked.
You know what? I will never reach that level of cool because I don't ever think I'll get that point conceded to me.
Oh, Scott. Well, yeah, but Schindler's List got two people to buy tickets.
No, it was pretty packed that night.
Oh yeah.
But it was a very intense film and really well acted. I mean, the guy did. God, what was his name? Liam.
Liam, yeah,
Did,
Liam Neeson.
yeah, yeah. The back half of William, right? You take William and you cut it in half, you get Liam or Liam. Anyway, he did a great job, and it was a very touching, tender movie, and it was pretty awful that that the world got in a spot where this was okay. and I was feeling it because I had all that pent up emotion from losing my relationship.
Yeah. Well, I hate to admit this, but I think she made a good decision because she didn't realize what she was getting into. And I'm sure you told her what movie you wanted to see before she went.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
Okay, so here's a little side tag. My current wife of almost 30 years now. Our first date was opening night of Jurassic Park,
wow. That
and we were in line. And so it's the first she basically in a moment of weakness agreed to go out with me, and we're sitting there in line, and the woman in front of us is about my wife is about 5'2", and this woman's about 5'2", and she turns and looks at me with all seriousness and says, "Why do the tall guys always ask the short women out?" And I looked at her like I knew the answer, and I said, "Ma'am, that's a misconception." I said, "It's the short girls who are picking the tall guys." And it was funny because my wife's like one of these really shy, serious people, and so it's like you could just feel her going, "Oh my God, he just said that to that woman." But
okay.
got lucky, and it stuck.
Well, it's a
But
good.
it's cool because we can always go back on Wikipedia and say, when did we first meet and go out? Oh yeah, that when Jurassic Park dropped.
And she enjoyed the movie.
She enjoyed the movie. It was, and she went and got. We have a cat named Blue, so it stuck. And I was a big Michael Crichton fan, so for me it was a double win. So I've read all of Michael Crichton's books a few times because I like the way they're put together.
Okay. Well, Scott, we got to wrap this one up. Why don't you give our audience some tools to help them find their joy?
Sure. Here's the thing. It's like within each of us. I mean, maybe you wrote some stuff down today. You're like, oh, I'm gonna check this out. It sounds pretty good. Check out Little Feat. I swear, you'll love that man. Um, but within each of us, we have these places, and we have these not just memories, but experiential places where we can go back to and find really deep comfort. And this is a fairly we're living in fairly turbulent times. I'm not going to lie to you. And family gatherings for the holidays are fairly turbulent, and so are like overstressed credit cards and all the other things that come along with the season. So when you're finding yourself just getting dialed up into that kind of a moment, it's okay to kind of fall back and take out your device and dial up your favorite song and dust it off and play it and just kind of go back to that spot. And remember that life's a really big thing. And sometimes we get stuck on really small things like they're super duper important. And it pulls us away from who we could be. And so it's our responsibility. It's like nobody's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hey, let me stick a paperclip up your what and reset you."
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. So instead, we have to kind of make do with figuring out where our reset button is and reminding ourselves, "Oh, I can push my reset button now. I don't have to keep going forward into this place where I'm not really a beneficial to myself, to my own health, to my body, to the people around me, to my community, and I can go back and be in a better place."
That's good,
So
Scott.
I think that's
That's well said. And life is a big deal for everybody.
the only deal you get as you. So
That's
there you
right.
go.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. This has been Justin Case and Scott bringing you American Consciousness, trying to help you find some joy. Thanks for joining us. Remember, additional information and links provided in this video is read more. Today's the day to subscribe to this channel. Please learn more about Scott when time permits.